Okay guys, today I'm gonna show you how to build a simple CRUD application with Zend Framework 2. I'm not gonna use the approach with entities which Acrobat is using in his album application. I think for the novice it's better to show Table Data Gateway approach, still object oriented, but ORM, object relational mapping, but something simpler. Okay, so let's start with the application. First, I have my application which is called FMI. By the way, you can find the code in my GitHub repository wingman007/FMI. So I'm starting by building a module. I'm gonna call this module CSN user because I'm gonna communicate with a database table which is called users in my database. Show tables. So here we go. This is the table with which I'm gonna communicate. I'm gonna create a CRUD against this table. Explain users. Okay, you see all the fields. So in my right hand I have the table, and on the left hand I have my code here. So I want to build something which can communicate with the database, can create records, update, delete, and retrieve all the records from this table. Okay, as I said, I started by creating a folder into the module folder. So I'm starting by creating a module. The first thing is to create a file which is called module.php and create a namespace, because the module is nothing else but namespace. PHP namespace CSN user, because this is the name of my module. I'm gonna create a simple class called module, and that's it. That's enough for creating a module. Of course, it's not gonna do very much, but let's now inform our application that we just created a new module. I'm going to config application, and I'm adding my newly created module to the list of available modules. By the way, when you start from scratch, CSN user, you won't have so many modules, but it doesn't make any difference. You just have to add CSN user on the application. Probably you will have only application module, so you just add it after that. I'm using this module to show and demonstrate different aspects of Zend Framework 2. That's why I have so many modules, and at the same time I allow some of my students to work on this repository to do pull requests. So that's why there are so many modules. But as I said, this doesn't change the situation for you. Okay, this is how my application looks. In the previous lesson I show how to set up a virtual host. I'm not going to repeat that. So let's refresh. Okay, nothing happens as you can see, but the application still is running, which is a proof that we didn't make a syntax error or something. In any case, under the hood, actually the module has been the module manager has instantiated probably one class of this namespace. Okay, now I'm gonna help myself because otherwise it's gonna take too long. I already have built this module, so I'm gonna copy a code snippets and explain at the same time. So by default, this is a standard, something like a standard procedure. In the module, I'm gonna add two methods. One of them is telling the application where is the configuration file of my module, and another one is setting up the Zend loader, standard autoloader, so the Zend autoloader actually can load the classes of my application, of my module. Okay, now I have to create a config folder and inside I have to put a module config php. CSN user module config. I'm gonna create a config now, config folder, and inside I'm gonna create a file called module config.php, which is the configuration file of my module, and it should return one array. Return array, and that's it. Okay, this is the module which I used to copy the snippet, the code snippet, so I'm gonna close it. I'm gonna keep the files which I just touched open in my IDE. In this case is Notepad++. Module, application config, and module config. Let's see if the application still works. Yep, it works. Perfect. Now, next, let's create a controller, because I want in this controller to have four actions, and those are the actions which will represent the CRUD: create, retrieve, update, delete. Okay, so I'm gonna create right now one folder which is called source, following the rules of the PSR 0, which means pretty standard really, 0. I'm gonna create inside of this folder another folder with the name of my module, because the autoloader is gonna look here for CSN user, and after that controller. I'm gonna create controller, and that's it for now. I'm gonna create a controller inside, which I'm gonna call user controller .php, and I'm gonna show you the code snippets. Here inside I follow the standards of Zend. I have to first set up the namespace, which is gonna be CSN user. CSN user controller. Okay. Just to make sure I don't make mistakes. User controller. I'm gonna copy. And initially it's gonna be just the class which inherits from abstract action controller. This is mandatory for Zend, so that's why I'm gonna copy these two classes and actually say use and explain when I say abstract action controller what do I mean actually. Okay, let's create the four actions. So we have CRUD. Let's create first retrieve. This method is public function index action. It's actually a Zend action. Okay, and this is R, retrieve. Okay, from CRUD. Gonna put it here. Next action is, let's say, insert, which is create. C, create. Another action, which I'm gonna call create. update. I put it retrieve first because first I'm gonna work on retrieve, and also as you can see here I call it index even though it should be called retrieve. By default, this is a habit which I have from Zend Framework 1. The landing page is called index, so that's why I'm using this index action, not retrieve action. Okay. The next is update. You update. And the last one is, of course, delete. This is D from the CRUD. Okay, so I just have created a controller which is a class inheriting abstract action controller, and I have created 4 actions. I have defined 4 methods which has a suffix action for Zend. That means that they will be accessible from the dispatcher. Okay, they could be dispatched. Now I have to do a little bit more. Return here, and I'm gonna return one object of class view model, and I will do this for all methods. Now we said the Zend is MVC. This is a controller from our MVC. So where is the model? It's not built yet, and we'll see if we're gonna build it and how we're gonna build it. But right now we need the presentation layer, the letter V in the MVC. Okay. In order to do that, we create a folder here in the module. It's called View, and as you can guess, now we again have to create another folder with CSN username. Inside we have to put the name of the controller, which is user, and I made a mistake here. It should be called CSN lowercase with dashes, separated with dashes, CSN user. The name of the controller is user, and inside of the user I will create, for each one of my actions, I will create a so-called view script, and the names correlate. So I'm gonna create index PHTML PHTML file, and this is the view script for my index action. After that I'm gonna create update, and delete. Here it is. Delete action, delete view script. Update action, update. Create index. Let's put something in our view script so we can see where we are. Okay, index, I'll say h1 index equals retrieve. Create. I call the actions with these names, create, update, retrieve, just to show the CRUD. Otherwise I could call it, for example, insert. This could be update or edit, but I would prefer to keep the names unchanged as much as possible. Update, and finally I'll have delete. Oops, here I didn't copy the first angle bracket, so this is delete. Hopefully I didn't make any mistakes. So we're ready with the controller, but how can we access our controller right now? Okay, very good question. Our application knows about our module, but we didn't describe in our module how the controller, where is the controller, how to be accessed from the URL. So let's do that. Now we have to open our module config file and define all these things. Okay. Now we have to display, explain right now how the controller could be instantiated by the service manager, and how can be accessed, and how its actions can be accessed. So go to module config, and instead of simple array, this time I'm gonna put a little bit more information, and don't worry, I'm gonna explain it right away. So this key here tells the service locator, the service manager, which is the implementation of service locator design pattern described by Martin Fowler, how to instantiate a controller. This name could be something different. This is just as a reference, but it's a standard in Zend Framework. So we have to say that controllers, invocables, you have to do it in Zend Framework too. Okay. Now we have to define routes. In other words, how can we get to our controller and the actions? This is the key which we use for the router to make the configuration of the router. We name our route somehow, and I have chosen to use lowercase underscore here, CSN user. There are 9 types of routes, different routes. I'm gonna use 2 of them. Literal, which means if I type CSN-user in the URL here, I'm gonna type it CSN-user, do this. By default, if I don't say anything more, go to CSN user controller, user controller, and execute index action. So come here and execute this action. This is what I'm saying. But there is a child routes. There are child routes. The name of my child route, my first child route, is default, and it's of type of segment, which allows me actually to have parameters here which are expecting values. So what I'm saying actually is, okay, if I type CSN/-user, go to this controller, but if I continue, the next token you assign to the controller parameter this value. So I can point to my controller by typing its name, which is gonna be user in this case. And if I continue, the next token will be accepted as action index, as you can see. I already typed it, index. And if I type something more, then this is ID. This is the value of the parameter ID. So that's it. After that, this is pretty much again standard. You just can copy and paste. As I said, you can find the code in FMI project and the modules CSN users. I'm gonna push this when I finish with this tutorial. Okay, and after that we explain how to get to our view scripts, and that's it. We're done. Let me summarize again. Build a controller, or actually start from the very beginning. Module, create a module, inform the application about the module, create a configuration file, or first create a controller, its actions, create the view scripts for each one of the actions, and after that do the configuration. And that's it. Hopefully we didn't make any mistakes, and let's see what happens now. No, call to undefined function CSN user controller. Let's see where the problem is. User controller on line 13. View model. Yeah, of course I didn't put operator new. I have to instantiate object of this class. Okay, hopefully that's it. Yes, it works, as you can see. And if you look at now the module config, you can see and guess how we can get to other actions. Okay, my other action is called create, so I'll try by replacing this token create, update. As you can see, everything works. Delete. Okay. Now, what's next? Let's concentrate on the first action, index action. So here we want to retrieve all the records from the database. Select everything from users, and we want to see all these rows displayed here in the browser. Okay, how we are gonna do that? Let's work and think here in the index action. What do we need? We need to connect to the database somehow. On the left hand side I have the code, I have everything prepared. On the right hand side I have my database. How should I make a connection? How shall I connect to the database and retrieve all the rows? Okay, what can we do? For the people which started to use PHP many years ago, what we can do to connect to the database, or even if you make a search in internet, PHP, for example, come on, PHP MySQL. If you go there, PHP MySQL, look at here what you can find. So let's try to connect, but boom, see, it's deprecated. MySQL connect. We can use the API, the MySQL API, to connect to the database. What's wrong with this approach? First of all, soon will be deprecated, as we see here. Second, it's not object oriented. If we don't care about that, of course, it's not such a big deal, but for me the biggest disadvantage is the fact that I tie my application to MySQL, this relational database management system. What happens if tomorrow I decide that my application will work with Postgre? Then I have to go through all my files and change the functions which I'm using to connect to the database, to retrieve the data. Okay, so this approach is not very good. So this is the first approach, and I don't like it. Is there something better? We need a data abstraction layer, because I want to be detached from the relational database management system. Tomorrow I can change the database to my MS SQL Server or something else. Is there such a solution? Yes, there is such a solution. Let's look for example, I know some of them. So one of them is AutoDB for PHP. I know that from the Microsoft world as well. Look at here. AutoDB is a database abstraction layer for PHP. There is a Python version, blah blah. The PHP version currently supports the amazing number of databases. So in other words, I can work with so many databases, relational database management system. That sounds very, very nice to me. I can use it. What other type of database abstraction layers do I know? I heard probably about PDO, PHP Database Objects. Here we go. That also looks very nice, but there is a problem with the second approach as well. I want to do object-oriented programming, so I don't want to put a procedural code here and mix codes. In the controller, I want to use only objects. Is there another approach? Yes, there is a third approach, which is called object relational mapping. Object relational mapping is a programming technique for mapping the incompatible data types. So if I have here class user, for example, and I instantiate, I would imagine something like that. Right now I'm thinking loudly. I don't have right now such class, but I would imagine that I would like to work like that. I like to instantiate one object, user, for example, and all its properties to describe this object. For example, I want to have a username, password accessible here in this object user. I want to have such properties, and I want to map everything what I have in the database. Explain users. I want to map all these fields with the properties in my user object. In other words, I would imagine I would like to have here user ID, for example, as a property, and I want to match the user ID value from the database of one record to the user ID property here in my object, and the same for the same of the fields and my properties. So how can I do that? Okay, this is the task. Actually, I want to practice the object relational mapping. Martin Fowler, in his famous book Patterns for Enterprise Application Architecture, actually is giving us 4 different design patterns. One of them is called Table Data Gateway, another one Raw Data Gateway, Active Record, and Data Mapper. In his album tutorial application, Rob Allen, Acrobat, actually it's using Table Data Gateway and Data Mapper a little bit not mixed, but they work together, so they're not in a very clear form. I will try here just to show the Table Data Gateway approach, which comes with Zend Framework 2 right off the box. And I'm gonna show you how to work with that. Of course, I'm not gonna use such entity user right now. I'm gonna use something else, but I'm gonna use Table Data Gateway. Of course, what Acrobat is done is right. I personally prefer to use to extend everything a little bit more, go one step further, and use Doctrine together with Zend Framework 2. Because right now the approach of Zend Framework 2 for the data mapper, it's a little bit more difficult. Okay, so Table Data Gateway. Okay, I decided that my solution will be the Table Data Gateway. I didn't take the first approach, I didn't take the second approach, and taking the third approach, which is to use the object relational mapping, because I like the object-oriented programming, and I am gonna use the Table Data Gateway. For me, this is the best probably for a novice to understand the concepts, and after that I can show you a little bit more complicated examples where you can understand the data mapper and how the album application is done. Okay, actually I use mind maps and you can find this concept and approaches in a branch which is called CRUD, Create, Retrieve, Update, Delete, here in the mind map. You also can find a link to the mind map under the movie. So in the sub-branch approaches, you'll see the approaches: MySQL, Oracle, Postgres, SQL, etc. API. This is my first approach, which I already demonstrated. I show it to you. I just mentioned, of course. I didn't dress it up with code. Database abstraction layer approach. You could use PDO database, AdoDB, or Zend Db adapter. This is one possible approach, and if you're gonna go this way, I would recommend use Zend Db adapter. Read in the documentation, of course. Here it is. SQL result set, and the section of the documentation which talks about the Zend DB starts with the Zend DB adapter. The adapter object is the most important subcomponent of Zend DB. Yeah, and I agree. You can create SQL queries with adapter. You can execute them, retrieve data, update, insert. You can do everything with the adapter. But this is not object-oriented, very object-oriented approach, because you have to type SQL directly in the controller, in the actions, and we don't want to do that. We just want to interact with objects. Okay, so Zend adapter, doctrine DBL, and the third approach is ORM techniques. Design patterns. Here, table data gateway, role data gateway, active record data mapper. So we are going to use table data gateway. I think this is the easiest and the simplest. This example is very simplified. Don't use this, as I said, on your production server. There are many things to be done to make it really strong and well working, but for the purposes of this tutorial I think it's enough. Okay, so enough talking. Let's get it done. If we're gonna practice the table data gateway, if we're gonna implement this design pattern, let's see what Zend offers. The table gateway object is intended to provide an object that represents a table in a database, and the methods of this object mirror the most common operations on the database table. Here we go. We have retrieve, we have create, we have update and delete. Okay, that's why I've chosen to use Zend Table Gateway. First, we have to prepare our table data gateway. If you read here, you'll see how to use it. I'm gonna show you directly the code. So first thing is to prepare one table data gateway in order to communicate with the database. Instantiate such object and set up properly and all this kind of stuff. You'll see that it's very, very simple. So I will do public function get users table. I'm defining a new method just to make for myself easy to access this object. I'm gonna help myself a little bit here. Source, probably I have it already open, but I don't remember. Yeah, I have it. So I'm gonna show you what actually I did. Of course, you can change the name of the variables. Looking the variable which I'm using right now, I don't like it very much, so I can change it eventually. I'll keep the comments here because I want to explain something else here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna instantiate one object of a class Table Data Gateway. Of course, I have to say here use Table Data Gateway. I'm gonna use out of the box what Zend gives me. So Zend Table Data Gateway, Table Gateway. I'm gonna name it users table without this underscore. This underscore actually reminds me that this is a protected or private member variable to this class. I'm just gonna remove it. Public function get users table. If this users table, I'm gonna create here one private property, users table, just not to instantiate it every time when I need it, if it's already done, if it's already instantiated. That's all. That's all you need to communicate with the database. Extremely simple, extremely simple. So if this users table exists, I am going to return it. If not, I'm going to instantiate it. Notice only the important parts here. You tell the table gateway which is the table. In my case is users. Yours probably could be something different. And the second, you have to give the Zend Db adapter to this instance. Okay, where this adapter comes from, I'm gonna explain to you and show it to you how it's done. In my application it's already done, but it's very simple to be done, so I'm gonna show it to you. I'm using a service locator to composite, to create, instantiate one object. We favor object composite, not inheritance, so that's why I'm using a service manager. Object composition, sorry. So what I'm gonna do is gonna use the service manager, service locator. This is the implementation, the Zend implementation of service locator design pattern. Module config autoload. Okay, going to global PHP and just make sure you have this section. You probably should have this section if you have done the album application, the Acrobat's album application. Okay, what is done here? Service manager. This is the key which we use in the configuration files, in the module configuration and the configuration files in autoload, global and local. This is the key which we use to define factories here for the service locator. We have to explain the service locator how to instantiate this class, how to create this object. And this is what we say. When I ask you for Zend Db adapter, you execute, this is a callback, you execute this callback, Zend Db adapter service factory. If you look at in Zend Framework, what it does, you will see that it simply looks for a key DB to find the configuration parameters for the connection to the database. In this case, I'm using a PDO driver. You'll see that. I'm gonna show that immediately. I have split the configuration parameters in two different files because I don't want to commit and share with everybody my username and password. So that's why they split in two, global and local. If you don't care, you can put everything in one of those files or another configuration file which should be called global or local PHP. They should finish with global, the names should finish with global.php or local PHP. Okay? That's why the information is split, but at the end all these configuration parameters get merged. Okay, so now let's see. MySQL DB name FMI. In my database it's called FMI. The host, eventually you can define the port here. The name is root. Don't do that. You have to create a separate user for your database, and the password is password. Okay. So Zend Db adapter service factory is gonna look for this key, take the information and instantiate one object of type Zend Db adapter for me, and this is my connection to the database. Is gonna give me the connection, but not only the connection. This is more complicated object. In any case, this database abstraction layer is gonna give me a lot, but that would be enough. That's gonna be enough for me to make the connection to the database, and this is what actually the table data gateway, Zend table data gateway, requires me to do. Okay. Hopefully this is clear. Okay, so that's enough for now to get the table data gateway going. How we are going to retrieve the data now? Just to retrieve the data, we have to ask for table data gateway. In this case, this is the method this get table, and I'm gonna select everything. Is that simple? And I can even do it like that, array. This is a record set. I'm gonna get a record set. Call the select method of a table data gateway. In my case, it's called the method which I have to call to get to the object table data gateway is get users table, and that's all. I can even remove this line. Cannot be simpler than that. Just let me make sure that this is the same name which I'm using here. Row set. Yeah, I call it row set. Great. So we just made a connection to the database using a table data gateway design pattern and the concrete implementation, Zend concrete implementation, and we just called the select method. And that's it. One line, and we are connected to the database, and we have all the lines, all the rows retrieved from the database. Now all we have to do is just to display them. Let's go to the view to the view script and do that. I'm gonna copy this because it's a tedious job. Of course, I'm gonna explain it. It's gonna take longer. View, CSR user, index. I'm gonna copy the code, paste it in my index view script, and I'm gonna explain. Okay, first I want to have a link to my action create, which is gonna say create. This is what this line does on row number 2, line number 2. After that, I'm gonna put the data in a table, HTML table, and in the header I will have user ID, username, and user email. You of course can choose to have more columns with more information. And I have transferred the row set to my view script. So now I can access it as I access any other variable. Row set as row, and I do for each row I'm doing the same thing. I'm just displaying the user ID, username, and user email. And on the last columns I'm gonna put here the edit and delete. I'm using the view helper, which is called URL, to construct the URL, mentioning the name of the root. Here it is, the root in module config, explaining the view helper how to build the URL, and sending the parameters controller, action, and ID. And that's all. Index, very simple. Here we go. I say, okay, URL, build me one URL following the rules of the root csn underscore user, child root default, and here we go, the parameters. I'm giving you the parameter controller, user, put as a controller, user, action, put a value update, and ID, take it from row ID. And that's it. That's enough. Let's see if that works. Yep, great. Now we have a shiny list of our records in the database. Select user ID, user name, and user email from users. Oops, I made a mistake. Select user ID, user email from users. Right syntax, blah blah blah. User ID, user name, user email. And of course from, not form. I have this habit. And here we go. Number 1, number 2, 9, 10, 11. Okay, done. So the first thing is done. Our first action has been created successfully. Here we go. Create, retrieve. Actually, we have just finished retrieving data from the database. Now, let's do the next one, create. What do we need for create? First thing is to build a form where we can collect the data from the user, and after that submit this data to this method create, and we will see after that what we are gonna do. Okay, let's first create the form. We create the form in a folder form on the source CSN user and module CSN user, source CSN user, controller, not but form. I'm gonna create a new folder called form, and I will have form and filters. Unlike Acrobat, I'm not gonna put the filters in one entity and get the filters and validators from there. I'm just gonna use one dedicated object. Okay, let me show you the form. What I do is I just define a new class, user form, which extends a form, just to use the useful method of the superclass form. Here we don't use injection and inversion of control, we just inherit, we don't compose it. Construct, this is a user form. We give the name to the form, method, post, and we add different elements to the form. Name, and we describe it. I'm gonna use the same names as the fields have in the database. So username, user password, user email, and so on and so forth. Okay, you will see this code. There is nothing special. The same way we built the filter, the input filters. Building the controller, building the forms and the filters, which will be applied to the elements, to the values which will come from the form. And they have to correlate. So as you can see, username is the name of the filter and validators, which I'm going to use for username element in my form. You can look at in the Zend documentation for the filters and validators, and that's it. The form and the filter are ready. As I said, I'm using very simple example. The validators and the filters needs to be done better, in a much better way. The form is okay, but also can be improved. So I will leave this to the viewer of this tutorial. You have to do it yourself. But for this simple example, I hope that you'll get the idea how to build a simple CRUD with Zend Framework 2 using the Table Data Gateway, which I think is the simplest way. Okay, so now let's use this form, newly created form, and filter in our application. First, I'm not going to use the service manager to instantiate them, of course. They will be instantiated only once, only in this controller. In this action, no, will be instantiated twice in two different actions, but this is not enough reason to me to delegate the instantiation and composition to the service manager. In any case, okay, let me show you that, and it's in clear form here when I show you what I'm doing. So I'm gonna instantiate one new form right now, user form. That's it. Let's see. Yep, it has been instantiated. Now, how the data will come in our application? We need a request object, because when for first time we come to our form, we are coming with method get usually, and when we press the submit button, we are using the post method, as you can see in the form. So the methods I'm gonna use to find out if somebody is trying to send me data or he is coming here, and the form should be absolutely empty, and I will expect him to fill the form and submit it. Okay, so this get request. That's why I need the request object, which has suitable methods which will help me to discover get or post has been used. Okay, let me look at here. I'm gonna copy the code snippets just because I don't want to type everything from scratch and make eventually mistakes, which is gonna slow down our work. Okay, form new user form. Let me try again here. Yeah, it works. Something was different before. Now let's see what we are gonna do if it's post. If it's post, we'll do the magic. If not, we have to display the form. How we are gonna display the form? Very simple. We send to the view the form, the object array, form, and we assign a form to this key in the array form. Let's see now how we are going to display the form in the view script. Go to create, and there is a standard way to do that. I'm gonna copy and paste again because it's quite a lot of time. It's gonna take me quite a lot of time. More time, not too much time. Okay, let's me look at my help here, and I'm gonna explain it. Copy and paste, update, not update, create. Okay, what I'm doing here, I'm getting the form from the keys. I send the form, I show it to you already. So it's very important to use the method form prepare, and after that I'm setting the attribute action. I'm describing where to go when the submit button is hit. So again, I'm building with the help of the view helper the URL. I want this form to go to the same action, to the same controller, user controller, and action create when the submit button is pressed, and form set attribute method post, and this is what I'm using just to display the entire form. I'm not going to use row by row view helper. I'm using this view helper which helps me directly to display the entire form. Let's see. Whoops, syntax controller 32. Okay, let me see where this is. Return new view model array form. Here we go. One extra space. Voila! Yeah, we have the form displayed in front of the user, and he can fill the fields and hit submit button. Of course, this is HTML5 radio this field, and it's not gonna allow me to send something which is different than an email. And as you can see, when I press the button go, I go to the same user controller, to the same action create. As I said, of course, you have to check the validators and input filters. Right now I made all the fields not required, which is not very good idea, but this is what I'm gonna leave to the viewer of this tutorial. Okay, now we successfully have created the form, we display it, and when we hit the submit button, we come here. When the submit button is pressed, we come to this branch of the program. So let's take actions here. Let's see what we are gonna do. First, let's assign the filters and validators to the form. After that, assign the data and ask the form, is the data valid? Okay, let's do that. Set input filters, set validators, and after that we will ask the form, okay, is the data valid using these filters and validators against this data? I'm not gonna type, I'm gonna just copy and paste. It's very, very simple. Is data valid? If yes, then we get the data from that form. The data is already validated and filtrated. We assign to one variable which is called data, and we are ready to record this to the database. That's all. Let me hit again the button go. See, nothing happens yet. If you have required fields and some of them is empty, you'll get the validation error, and I'm not gonna demonstrate that as I want to make this tutorial as short as possible. All we have to do now is just save the data to the database and redirect to the landing page, to the index action, and display the newly created record and all other records, of course. So we call this get user table, we call the method of the table data gateway insert, and that's it. Our table data gateway, I will repeat again, is already prepared to talk to the table users. It extracts data from there and saves data to there, to the same table. So that's why I don't have to say anything else. Another concept which I want to describe is the so-called features which you can supply. What that does is, when you return data here in the action index, for example, you can return the data in a form of array or objects. If you use this feature, which is optional, of course, the data which you will get is a collection of objects which are raw data gateways. Those are objects with properties which correlate to the fields of the table. And in this case, in index, instead of using raw, this approach, you should use raw user ID. Not gonna do that and demonstrate it. You can manipulate the rows as objects. Okay, so if we do that right now, we will see that we will get error because empty string is not acceptable for the database for the registration date, and also there is submit which gets submitted to the to this array of data, and it's not gonna be accepted. Let's try and see. Here we go. As I said, submit. So from the coming data we have to remove submit, and we have to prepare the data. I am using the most simplest way to do that. Of course, can be done differently. I unset the submit value, and for the data, if it's not set, I'm giving the today's date, 12. Okay, now everything will work, and we will have a new record in the database, in the table. Continue. Here we go. Here we go. Let me show you again. Number 16 has been just created by us. Okay, so create action has been done. Let's concentrate on edit now. The only difference between edit and create is that we populate the form before we display it to the user. So I can do copy and paste here, and after that adjust a little bit. Let's do that. First, I have to make sure that the ID of the row has been sent to me, otherwise I cannot do edit. I don't know which row to edit. I'm gonna do it line by line. Okay, let me try again. Update works. If the ID is not supplied here, as you can see in the URL, I'm gonna redirect back to the list of the records. Now I'm going to instantiate again the form. Again, the very well known request object. We're going to ask the request object if it's post. If it's post, then pay attention, we have to do something. Of course, we have to send the form to the view. Array form and prepare the view script, which is update. I'm gonna copy and paste again. It's almost the same like for create action. Again, we take the form, sorry, we prepare the form, we set the action. This time we ask to say to update, and here I prefer to keep the ID in the URL. Method post open tag form collection. Otherwise I have to create a hidden field in the form where I have to keep the IDE. And that's it. Let's see if the form gets displayed. Of course is not gonna be populated, as you can expect. Okay, so notes undefined variable IDE update PHTML. Yes, I'm gonna send ID as well. Let's see now. Yep, it works. Perfect. So we are ready with the first part. Actually, not quite. We have to display the data. Now we have to take from the database the row, which we have to edit, populate the form, and after that display it. Let's see how to do that. With one line, only one line. Set data, we say to the form set data, and after that we extract the data from the database. We turn back again to our table data gateway object and we say select. We send as a parameter user ID, and that's it. We have the row. We use this array, which we will get from table data gateway, to populate our form, and we are ready to go. Let's see if that works. Let's go back to one of our rows. Here we go. Now, when we hit submit, of course, as you can see, now the form is empty because it goes through this branch of the program, of the code, and here we don't populate with any data the form. Let's continue thinking. Now, once we have the data, what do we have to do? Of course, we have to set up the input filter and validators to make sure that the data is correct, is valid. And after that, ask the form, is it valid? If form is valid, and if it's valid, we will do something. Oops. Still nothing happens. We'll continue sending. Of course the data is not correct. I have to go to the list of records and after that come here to update. Okay, now let's think, what else do we need? We need to extract the data from the form object. Now the data will be filtrated and validated according to our filtrations and validations model object. Again, we will unset the data and we will take care of the data field if eventually there is nothing there or it's wrong data. As you can see right now, it's very naive. It should be done properly, but as I said, I'm gonna leave this to you. Okay, my assumption is that the user doesn't make any mistakes and types the data in correct format, which is this one: the year dash the month dash date, and after that the time. The time you can you don't have to type eventually. And after that, all we have to do is again update the record and redirect back to our list of records, and that's it. This time we call again our table data gateway object and we say update, send the data, send the user ID, and redirect. That's it. Let me go to the index page again, which is index, and let's edit the last record, which is with ID number 16. Edit. Here we go. Password. I'm gonna put here SDS12 or something just to prove that it works. I'll choose a member. I'll choose French. Active. Is it active or not? Yes, the member is active. Activated. The account is activated. I'm gonna change the time to the current time, which is 12:20. Registration token, just to prove that everything works. And here we go. We see here only the changes of the username, because this is what we display. But if we hit edit again, you will see that email was confirmed, yes. The current time 12:20, local time, password, and I even add the email. I'm gonna add something which looks like an email, and I'm gonna hit again go, and voila, it works. And the last one action which we have to do is delete. It's very simple, very extremely simple. Only delete is empty, as you can see now. We don't even need a view model, because we'll delete and we'll go back to our index page. Okay, so here we go. I'll explain it very quickly. It's very simple method now. As I said, I don't even need to return something to the view script. Okay, so first I'm getting the IDE. If the IDE is not sent, I have to redirect. In any case, I'm going to redirect. If the ID is not sent, I just will not do anything. I just will stay idle. But if the ID is sent, then I turn again to my object, my gateway, my table data gateway object, and I say delete array user ID, and that's it. The rest will be done for me. As I said, this is probably not the best way to do CRUD, but I think it's very clear and simple. Of course, I prefer the Acrobat's version if I have to do something, or even better if I'm using entities and entity manager as Doctrine, like Doctrine, which is even better. I prefer Doctrine and working with entity manager. Okay, let's see if the edit works. Delete works. Okay, delete. Let me show you the JavaScript which I just added. It's a very simple, very light JavaScript. You could call it naive. So to the anchor tag, I just added on click return confirm. If it's false, then the browser is not going to follow this link. So I'm taking advantage of this fact, and I'm returning false or true. I'm using confirm. Do you really want to delete the record? Maybe I should put a semicolon, question mark. And if the answer is yes, then this statement actually returns true. On click becomes true, and it follows the link. The browser follows the link, which leads to our action delete, and the record will be deleted. Let's try. Delete. Okay, and here we go. It has been deleted. Let's add another one. Create. Retrieve. We just retrieved. Here we go. Update. Go. Has been updated. And delete. Thank you very much for your attention. That's it. See you next time. when I'm gonna explain more complicated matters and topics probably.